In this video, we're gonna clean up our code a little bit. We're gonna fix our application to get it more production ready. Right now, if we go to the upload endpoint, actually I need to start up my application. So let me just do that real fast. npm start. Before I start that one, I need to start up my backend. And I just run this shell script here to start up my backend. And what that shell script does is it just makes sure that my virtual environment is activated, and then once it is, then it starts up my application with this Python command. Saves me a lot of time from having to start up my virtual environment if it hasn't already been started. So now I'm ready to start up my front end. So it's going to load the app, and if I were to go here and select the file, submit this file, and it just loads this default transcription and this default video along with the audio waveform for this video. And this isn't the video I uploaded. We had some code in here so that we could quickly test our application and not have to upload a file. So I'm just going to clean that up in this video. We're going to add some endpoints. So the upload endpoint was already there, but we're going to refactor it a little bit. We're going to add the video endpoint so that we can retrieve our videos from the backend from storage. So we haven't connected this to any cloud storage, but we're going to create a service that we can easily change. So if we want to store the files locally when we're testing, or we want to store them in the cloud, whether that's Google Cloud Platform, AWS, Azure, whatever you're using, we're going to create a service so that you can store to whatever cloud or whatever storage system you want. And we're going to cover all that in this video. It's going to be less about the code. I want to make these videos less about the code because that's the direction that our industry is going in, right? We do less of the code, but we have to understand how to think like an LLM, what kind of context we need to provide them with, and how we can best support them so that they can generate the code for us. We still want to understand the code, of course, otherwise we're not going to be able to troubleshoot. And you'll see in this video, I wouldn't have been able to work through these issues if I didn't understand the code. So let's get started. So I'm just opening up the conversation I had here with Cursor in order to generate these file changes. And when I started, when I started on these changes, it had been a while since I worked on this code base. I have other projects, a lot of other projects that I'm working on. And so sometimes I forget where was the last place I left off, or where I needed to go next, or how my application even works. So here I just provided it with the upload page, and I asked Gemini 2.5, what does my upload page do? And the reason I did that, usually I ask 4.0 mini, just so it doesn't cost me any premium requests, but it says Gemini 2.5, although I'm pretty sure I asked 4.0 mini. I always recommend you do that so that you don't run out of premium requests. Anyways, I'm asking it because what I'm trying to do is go into my upload page here, and when I upload a file, I want it to send the file to like some backend service. I have the backend, right? And it's receiving that file, but that backend isn't really doing anything with that file. It's storing it in the server, which is just running in my local environment. But I want to change things up. I want to update this upload. Well, actually, we don't have an upload endpoint. So that's what I want to understand, this upload page and what it does, so that I can remember how it works, and in my next prompt I can prompt Cursor to make some changes. So first I just ask it, what does my upload page do? And then here it's just telling me that my upload page allows users to drag and drop files so that they can be uploaded. And then when a file is dropped, it checks if the file is a video. If it is, it processes the video. And then the next thing is, when a video file is selected or dropped, the component generates a unique ID for the video and creates a URL for the file using this method. So if we look at the code here on the left hand side is what it was doing before Cursor made these changes, but you can see that we have here this handle change for whenever we select the file. There's also the handle drag, the handle drop, but they all ultimately call, if we look at these functions, they all ultimately call this handle file. And all this is doing is taking in the file, it generates some video ID using the date and some random strings, and then it creates this video data object, creates a URL for that file, and then it stores into local storage. Well, first it gets the existing videos from local storage. It updates that object from the local storage, and then it sets it back into local storage. So basically this isn't the proper way to upload a video. It's not sending this file anywhere. It's just basically creating an ID for that video, creating a URL for where we can find that video, and then creating a name and saving that into local storage. And then it's navigating to this edit page along with the video ID. And I'm guessing here, if I go into the edit page, in the edit page we have this params right here. So we have this effect hook that is looking at the URL and extracting the video ID from the URL. And then based on what it finds in the local storage using that video ID, then it sets the video according to that local storage. We don't want to store our videos in local storage. We want them to go to some backend service. And so that's the reason for the next prompt. Now that I understand what it's doing, then I can prompt it and say, I need to update my handle file function. And I realized I actually should have told it what I was referring to, but it's this one here, handle file function in upload. So let me just update this so that I have it correct in the description of this video, in upload page.js. When a user uploads a file in my upload page, then the handle file function gets called with the file as the input. We need to update this logic so the handle file sends the file to the backend service, which is main.py. The backend service doesn't have an endpoint to handle file uploads, so you will need to create one. This backend should save the file to the server, create an ID for the video, and respond to the front end with a video ID that it can use to retrieve the video from the backend. Once the handle file receives the video ID from the backend request, then it can navigate to the edit page for that video. And then I gave it lines 61 through 62. So let's look at that was an upload page right here. So let me go back to the upload page, and 61 through 62 is right here. So I'm just telling it to look at how it's navigating before. Okay, and then lastly, please implement the logic for this. So I submit it, and in this prompt, I basically explained how the code should flow, right? And it's because I have some familiarity with writing code. I know how these things should work. But if you're a beginner and you don't know what's the proper way to upload a file from a front end and then send it to the back end, then you could ask a model like Perplexity. I really like using Perplexity for research because it can use the web and find the latest documentation. So it's the most helpful for code. Even something like Claude, if I were to use Claude 3.7 now, it may not have the latest information. And so Perplexity is just better, in my opinion, for that reason. But I would ask it a question like, how do I upload a file from my backend to my front end? How does it work? It would give me a response. I do a little bit of research. I might even copy the workflow that it gives me. It might even give me this same workflow. And I would just tell Cursor that I needed to update the upload component to implement this logic, and I need some backend service that receives this uploaded file. And then I just provide it with the code that I got from doing my research, maybe from Perplexity or from Claude or whatever LLM you're using. So you don't have to know how to code necessarily. Obviously this one I wrote because I know how to code, but with a little bit of research, you should be able to get to the same point. Anyways, it generated some changes. I don't want to go over in detail what these were, but I had to prompt it again because if we look at the code that it generated, let's look at right here in main.py, it created this endpoint here, upload file, and that's in the main server file. So I told it to move the server logic that it just wrote to the routes path, just like how the transcribe endpoints are in one routes file. So if we look at my structure, you can see I have in my app, I have routes, and I have this transcribe endpoint. And these are all the endpoints. Let me scroll down. These are the endpoints regarding transcribing, right? I have this endpoint here, and then I have this endpoint transcribe file, and they're all contained in this routes transcribe file. So I want Cursor to do the same with my upload. And so that's the reason for the next prompt. And then it did it correctly. So here's the upload file properly in the routes. And this is being imported by my routes init file here. You see it's uploading the router as upload router, and then it's exporting it so that when my main server file, so that's main.py, when that requests that upload router, it just requests it at app.routes. And so then it can use that upload router and include it here. That way my server file, the main one, which is this one here, stays nice and clean. I only have the logic that's actually absolutely necessary, and I don't have things like the routing logic for a specific endpoint. Let's see, what else did I tell it? Yeah, so I just made that change, and that was it. I committed that message or those changes. And in summary, it added a file upload endpoint and refactored the structure a little bit. And just so that we can take a quick look, let's see how that upload logic works. So it takes in the file, it gets the file extension, it gets the original file name without the extension, it sanitizes it to make sure that there's no SQL injection or some special characters that someone's trying to hack my server with by introducing these special characters. And then it's creating a location for where it's going to save that file. It does save it. And again, this is the backend, which is running in my local environment. So this is saving it locally, but in the next few messages that we have for Cursor, we're gonna update this. So we're using cloud service if we want. And so once it saves that file, then it returns in the response the video ID. And the upload page is going to receive that result here when it makes the request to my backend at the upload endpoint, and it submits the video in the form of a form data. You can see that the video file is being appended to that form data. Once it gets a response, as long as the response is okay, it's going to navigate to the edit endpoint with the provided video ID. So now the next step would be to handle this logic, right? So if a user goes to the edit endpoint and provides a video ID, I need to be able to show them that video ID. Before we were storing that locally in local storage, but that's not going to work in production. Or even if I were to open it up on a new computer and upload the video from that computer and then try to access this endpoint using that video ID from a different computer, it's not going to find it, right? Because it's not being stored in some server that can return that video file. So in the next prompt that we'll submit to Cursor, we're going to add the logic for returning the video according to the video ID. But before I do that, I want to make sure that I commit these changes, and so that's why I wrote that commit message. And here's the summary if you want to read it. All right, so let's move on to the next part. And like I said, these videos are going to be less about the code and more about how I prompted Cursor so that you can become better at prompting it yourself. And one last thing that I should have done to show you that this code works is what we implemented was this. You'll see I select the file, I upload this video. We didn't change anything here, so this is still working as expected. This isn't the video I uploaded, but now we can see that this video ID is up here and it's stored. All right, so now that I uploaded this video, I can go into my server uploads, and here it is. I can see that this ID, this video file name, matches the video ID that's up here. And if I play it, that is the video I uploaded. So it is uploading my video from my front end to the back end. Okay, so now to get the right video, so remember the video for this ID was the Deadpool one. In order to get that video on here, whenever I load this page, we're going to prompt Cursor with the following. My edit page has an effect hook that gets the video ID from the query parameters. So let me just open up that edit page right here, and then it's line 19 through 35. So this one right here. Let me collapse this and that. So this is the effect hook that gets the video ID from the query parameters. Continuing on. I need to update the rest of the logic. After it gets the video ID, it sends a request to the backend to get the video from the backend, which is main.py. So instead of doing this where It checks that the video ID is there and then gets the video data from local storage. I want it to get it from the backend. The backend will look for this video in the directory where files are uploaded. And I tell it to see upload.py. So let me open up that file. We can see that when this endpoint is reached, which is the upload one, it saves the file to this file location using this directory right here. So that's basically what I'm trying to tell it to look at. Let's continue on with the prompt. The backend can search in this directory for a file using the video ID, which is part of the file name. For example, video ID 65432 will be in the file name, and then here's just an example that I gave it. Please implement the logic to handle this. When adding a new route to my Fast API application, please make sure to create a separate route file like is done with the other routes. See upload.py. Basically, I'm just trying to tell it not to make the same mistake as last time where it created the route inside of the main.py, and instead I want the route in a separate file. Alright, so let's see what it did. It says it understands. And again, just like with the last prompt that I gave it, I'm directing it to make the code changes. Obviously, I already know what to do because I'm describing what it should do. And only someone who understands how to write code would be able to do that, and you may not know how to do that. I don't even want to try to prompt it without having some understanding, because I think that just is going to get really messy when you try to purely vibe code without really understanding the code or reading it. It might take you a lot of prompts just to get some simple request done. Like for example, this request, I think I got it done in maybe just one prompt. Yep, it was just one prompt, and it did it successfully, obviously, because I committed that. But I don't know if I would be able to do it if I didn't, or at least do it in one shot, if I didn't understand how the code works. And just like before, if you don't understand what to do, you can copy your source code, provide it to an LLM directly, or you can do it on here and just ask it to describe to you how it would implement the change that you're looking for. Anyways, let's go to the bottom and let's take a look at the changes it made. So it looks like it created this video.py file, and I can take a look at this video.py file, and here's the route that it created. So it's instantiating the router, and then it's taking the video ID as the input, and then it's looking for this prefix in the file name, and then looking inside of that directory where the files were uploaded. If it does find that file path, then it returns the actual file. Awesome, that's exactly what it wanted. So now it needs to update main.py. So let's take a look at the changes it made in main.py. We can see that it's importing the video router, and it's including it here in the application. What else does it do? And then in the edit page, it made some changes. So let's take a look at that edit page. We can see that before it was getting the video ID based on what was in local storage, but now it's actually going to fetch the video ID from the backend. Here it's making the request to the backend, and then it has some logic for handling if anything goes wrong, but otherwise, as long as it does get a good response, then it goes down to here, creates that fetch video file object, and it sets the video file state according to that object. And then since we haven't told it anything about the transcription, it's just going to load the default transcription. And if there is an error, then it's going to call the load default video. Let's go back into cursor, see what else it made, what changes to. It looks like that's it. I did notice something though in the main.py file. It's importing video router, and you can see that it's not blue, and that's because it's not available at this path. So if we go to app routes, and that's going to be the init file, you can see that the video router is not there. And it's just because it forgot to do this, basically. So now if I do that, then now it's blue, so now it's going to work. It's just letting me know that there's something wrong before I run my application. Alright, so to test our app, let's go into the edit page and let me refresh. And we can see that it's still loading the default transcription, the default video. That's good. I didn't provide anything in the URL parameters. Let's go to the upload page, and I'll upload that Deadpool video. And we can see that it's showing the video here. I wonder if the audio waveform corresponds to that video. Okay, so it looks like it does because it is a lot. Yep. So it does correspond to that video. Now, what if I were to take this? Let me get it out. I go back in here. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're showing the default video. And now I were to paste that video ID in the URL, and it found the right file. Awesome. And that's because we just created the backend so that whenever we send it a video ID, the backend returns the video that corresponds to this ID. And right now we're just storing these files locally. If we look at the upload endpoint from before, we're just storing them right here. This is the file location that we're creating it, and then we're saving it, which is found under the server app, or it's actually server uploads right here. And this is the file that we just uploaded. But we don't want to store our files, especially something as large as a video file, in our server, right? We want to be able to separate that out from our server, because when we deploy this to production and users are uploading files, we're going to quickly run out of storage space in our server. And it's just not good practice to save your files there. We want to use some kind of cloud service, cloud storage service. And so that's the next thing that we're going to work on. But before I do that, I just want to make sure that there weren't any other changes. It looks like it was just one-shot prompt. And then I just told it to commit the changes that it made. And basically it added a video retrieval endpoint, which is the video endpoint. And is using a fast API route to serve that video based on the video ID. Great. All right, for this next part, I had to consult with DeepSeek because I wasn't sure what the best way was. So this is a good example of when you don't know what to do or how to prompt it, you can just do a little bit of research on your own to get to the answer that you're looking for. So I just asked DeepSeek, I have a React application that accepts a video file to be uploaded. I want this video file to be saved to my cloud service provider. For example, Google Cloud Storage. But I don't want to save it to cloud storage whenever I'm working locally. How should I design my app? The front end is built with React.js and the back end with Fast API, Python. And then it tells me, here's the implementation strategy. At the top, it's just looking at the architecture. But here it tells me I need to create these environment variables. Basically, the storage type when I'm working locally should be local. And then when it's in production, it could be something like GCS, Google Cloud Storage. You can configure this however you want, but that's just how it's working for me. And then the local storage path is just the uploads. And then if you do store in Google Cloud Storage, then provide it with the bucket name. And then here's the backend service that it's creating. So it's using the ABC library to create this storage service. And the storage service, it has one method, it's called save video, and it expects to receive a file, an uploaded file as the input, and then the file name. And then using this storage service, we're creating other storage services that inherit from it. So we have this local storage service and then this GCS storage service. And both of them need to have the save video method defined. So we can see that when we're in the local storage, we have this save video method, and it's just saving the file locally to the file path according to what the storage path is. And the storage path we define up here. When we instantiate the local storage service, we're supposed to provide it with the storage path as the input, so that when we run local storage service dot save video, then it saves that video using that method. And then the Google Cloud Storage service is here, and you can see that this save video method is a little bit different. It's gonna upload that video to Google Cloud Storage. And I'm not sure if this is the right technique, if this is the latest, based on the latest documentation, but we'll work on that later once we actually do want it to deploy. Right now, I just wanted it to create this service so that we can get thinking about how we're gonna deploy this application and how we can work with it when we're developing locally and when it's deployed to some kind of cloud service. So we have this function here. All it does is returns the service that we're going to use based on the storage type. So if it's GCS in my environment variables, then it's going to return that Google Cloud Storage service. Otherwise, it'll be the local storage service. And then for the fast API endpoint, it's just showing me that this is the upload endpoint, and it's gonna get the storage service, using that function that we just looked at, and then it's gonna save that video. And this endpoint here and the endpoint handler has no context of whether this is happening locally or if it's saving it in cloud storage, because all it's doing is getting the storage service, and that could be either one, right? That could be the Google Cloud or local, depending on what I have in my environment variable. And then it's just saving the video. And the save video method for both of these is the same, accepts the same input. It's just a matter of what it does, whether it's saving it locally or to Google Cloud Storage. That's different. But when they both respond, they respond with a file path. And with Google's, it's just the file path in that Google Cloud Storage. Anyway, so it receives that as the input or as the output from that save video method, and then it uses that file path to respond to the front end with that file path. And then here we have the React application. I said I wasn't going to make this about the code, but it's becoming about the code, but whatever. Let me know if you want to see less code explanation and you just want to know how I prompt cursor to give me what I'm looking for with just one shot prompting. All right, so we have this video uploader, and it's the same thing that we already have. We have this button that when we click on it, it sends the input video to the handle upload function here. And then it's just creating that backend request. So it creates this form data, it appends that file to the form data, and then it sends it to the backend, to that endpoint that we were just looking at. And once we get a response, as long as it doesn't have an error that gets caught and then this error message is returned, then it will just return the message that came from the backend. And then finally, once it's done, whether it worked successfully or it caught the error, it's going to set the uploading state to false. And that's it. It just explains what it did. So what I did is I took that code base and I saved it to a file called DeepSeek, or a directory called DeepSeek. I took all these files, 1, 2, 3, 4, including the environment variables, and then I provided all those 4 files in one directory as the context for cursor. And then I prompted it with, I submitted the prompt below to DeepSeek and it generated some code. I would like to implement this idea into my application. Right now my backend endpoint upload is what receives the uploaded video. I would like to update the logic of this endpoint handler to use the service according to storage type in the environment variables. Please implement this storage service in my project and create a directory to contain this service. Look at my file structure to determine the best place for this service directory. And so I just provided it with the prompt that I had given DeepSeek along with the files that DeepSeek returned. And then it thought for a while, it looked at my file structure, and then it started to generate some code. So here it created this first file. We can see that that file is found under app services. And this is just to create the module for our services. And then it works on creating the storage file. We can see that right here. And it's the same thing that DeepSeek had created. It's the same exact code. So created that. And let's see what else did it do. And then in the configuration, it looks like it got the environment variables. Yeah, so it's getting the storage type from the environment variable, and then also the bucket name. And then it's gonna update the logic of the upload endpoint. So let me open up upload, and we can see it looks like it made a lot of changes. So whereas before it was right here, it was just getting the file name, getting the extension, getting the original file name after it sanitized it. And then within this endpoint handler, we were saving down here you can see that it was saving the file to the server. We're not gonna do that anymore. Now all it's doing is it's getting the video ID, it's just generating one. It's getting the storage service. Again, this is gonna return whatever storage service we have configured in our environment variables, whether that's GCS or local. It's gonna return this service, and then we just have to call the save video method on this service, pass in the file, pass in the video ID, and then the file name, and then it will respond with the file path, which we can log here and respond to the front end with that video ID. So notice how we separated out the functionality of actually saving the video into a service, so that this endpoint handler has no idea where that saving is actually happening, because all that core functionality is happening within this storage service, which is how we want to modularize our application. And that was it. It implemented it flawlessly. So with that, I just write the prompt to make the commit message, and we can see that in summary, it implemented the storage service for video uploads. And so now in our environment variables, we just want to make sure that we've defined a storage type and then the path to the files that we're going to be storing, along with the bucket name for GCS if that's what you're using. If you're not using GCS, you can just create another service under the storage file. Just create one identical to this one, just change the logic down here for how it's actually saving the video to whatever cloud storage you're using. All right, so let's just make sure that our application is still working. Let me upload a file again. And I have in my environment variables, I have it configured. Oh, there was an error. Oh, I think my server isn't running again. Yeah, it wasn't. Let me just start it up. And while it's starting up, let's make sure we're here. All right, it looks like it's running now, so I can select the file and submit. It's uploading the video. And here I am again. And let me just refresh the app here. And yep, it's still showing that same video. So our local storage is still working as expected. We don't have our Google Cloud Storage set up yet, so it's not going to work if I change this to GCS. We'll work on that in the future. All right, so we updated the upload endpoint, but we didn't update our video endpoint. If we navigate into the video endpoint, it's still, if we look at the logic, when I navigate to this video endpoint, it's still expecting to be able to find that video file in local storage. You can see right here, it's getting the file path, and then it's returning that video file according to what it finds in the server. So we need to update this, because if we're storing our files in cloud, then it's not going to be in our server. So that's why I prompted cursor with the following. I just updated my upload endpoint to use a storage service in order to save the uploaded video file. Now I need to update my video endpoint handler so that it checks for the video according to the service that was used for uploading. So I think my video endpoint handler needs to use this storage service, and the storage service needs to be updated with methods to return the video file. Can you please implement these changes? I provided it the video endpoint, the upload endpoint, and then the storage service. So basically right now, if we look at the service storage, we can see that local storage only saves video, and the same is true for our Google Cloud storage. It doesn't return that video. So we need to add a method so that when we do land on this page here with the video ID, it returns that video no matter whether we're using the cloud storage or local. And so with that prompt, when I submit it, let's see what it generates. So first it recognizes that it needs to update the storage service. And we can see that it added a new method to the storage service. Right here it's just passing it because we're going to inherit from that storage service. The children need to implement that same method, so we can see how local storage here, the child of storage service, is implementing the get video, and it's doing what the video endpoint was doing before, which is just checking the local storage, right? Checking for that file in our server and then returning that file. And then for our Google Cloud Storage, it's checking for that file in Google Cloud Storage. And then once it finds it, it returns the path to that video. Actually, it looks like it's returning the video file itself. Is that the same for this one? it just returns the file path and the content type for local storage. And yeah, it's also returning a path in the server where it can find that video. All right, great. That's exactly what we wanted. What other changes did it make? And so now it needs to update the video endpoint, because that video endpoint no longer needs to check for our file in the server. Now it needs to call that service and get the video using that service. And again, it doesn't care whether that was locally or in cloud. That is determined by the storage service that it's returned here. And then all we have to do is run get video on that storage service, and then we'll get it depending on what is configured in our environment variables. And then once we get a response, we return that video file to whatever client made the request to this video endpoint. And that's why it works. If we refresh this page, it's erroring out again because my server isn't running. Okay, that was the last change that I made, so it only changed those two files. So let me just start up my server again. All right, it's running, so now I can hit refresh, and we have the video. Amazing. We got our app to work. We made a bunch of changes. We refactored some of the code. We created some endpoints, and we created some services so that we can store our files in cloud or locally. And we can easily switch between the two, whether we want to store it in local storage or in cloud, just based on what we have in our environment variables. And our app is becoming more production ready. Thanks for watching. I have an exciting episode for the next one. We're going to refactor our entire code to use TypeScript. If you haven't used TypeScript before, you want to watch the next episode because it's going to be full of good reasons why you need to use TypeScript. With that, I'll end this video. Please give it a like and subscribe to see more.